Chapter 5461. Despair if audio player doesn't work. Press stop then play button again. Chapter 5461. Despair. Although spectators and the combatants were prepared mentally for something like this to happen, they still became astounded. The four apex cultivators should have been unstoppable in the upper continents. Supreme swapped his void thrust into one filled with emotions and compassion, targeting beyond the physical realms. Immortal Pagoda unleashed his strongest attack with the help of his primordial fruit. Xueqi's Tao was omnipresent and unblockable. Eternal had complete mastery over the temporal affinity. The four in combination could kill all things or Sword Queen. Alas, Xueqi easily sent them flying. They couldn't damage a hair of his. It seemed that he was merely swatting four mosquitoes, nothing more. The Dragon Lords and Emperors felt despair while watching this, let alone regular cultivators. The latter viewed apex cultivators as the peak of this world. They could try for a lifetime and never reach this level. Only a few chosen ones had the privilege to even attempt this feat now. Their power and prestige only served as decorations for Xueqi's frightening ability. What kind of existence was he, to defy reasons and logic? At the very least, there was a sliver of hope in catching up to Supreme. It might require an immense time but not impossible. As for Xueqi, they didn't even have a grasp on his true power. Even if they were at the apex, they still couldn't catch up to him. Nonetheless, some maintained an optimistic viewpoint. They were witnessing a being above the apex, meaning that a path was actually possible. Being a top conqueror was not the end of the road. Ha ha ha. The wounded Xueqi laughed heartily and said, "There is no end to the Tao, it can fulfill all ambitions." He was proud of his oceanic slash but was swiftly defeated by Heart Blade. He thought that he wouldn't be able to surpass this achievement, nor could anyone else. Although Sword Queen and Supreme were incredible cultivators, they could only match him at best with regard to the Sword Tao. Alas, the moment he saw Xueqi's Heart Blade, he knew that he had lost. He finally caught a glimpse of the endless possibilities. N-0VLB in his Tao came from finality, a legendary and peerless scripture. He couldn't surpass it, hence his sadness in feeling the limitation of his Tao. Today, Heart Blade shattered his understanding of the Sword Tao and enlightened him. The previous duels with Supreme and Sword Queen did not have this effect since they were evenly matched. "Sir, please accept my gratitude for the lesson." The wounded Xueqi lowered his head, unable to contain his excitement. Spectators became sentimental while watching the aftermath of the battle. Bottlenecks existed in all cultivation realms. Apex cultivators had an even harder time breaking through. They normally needed a supreme fortune or an opportunity. This applied to Xueqi as well. Today, seeing Xueqi's Heartblade was his God-sent opportunity. An eternity is still ephemeral in your eyes. Eternal Conqueror sighed and said, "I was displaying my slight skills before an expert and made a fool out of myself." With that, he turned toward the last-gen members of Divine Alliance and said, "I have tried my best earlier, my debt is now repaid. Gentlemen, goodbye now. I hope we will be able to meet again." He then bowed in Xueqi's direction before disappearing from sight, not caring about anyone else's opinion. Of course, no one outside of Xueqi could stop him anyway. He only worked for Divine Alliance to repay a debt. With that done, there was nothing keeping him here. Divine Alliance suffered heavy losses today, losing both Xueqi and Eternal Conqueror. Chapter 5462. The Tao's endless silence took over the battlefield after the defeat of four apex cultivators. Eternal departed. Xueqi had no intention of continuing the fight. The race suffered a devastating blow, perhaps losing half of its firepower. If four couldn't beat Xueqi, how could two ever hope to do so? "Sir, I have nothing but admiration for your power." Supreme bowed and said, "The Tao is endless, certainly worthy of our pursuit." Immortal Pagoda showed no loss of morale after losing. Nothing seemed capable of breaking their spirit. As long as they were around, they would serve as pillars for the race. "The two of you must have entered Celestial Court and saw those geezers," Xueqi said with a smile. The two exchanged glances and took a deep breath. This was the highest of secrets. How did he know? Leaking certain secrets relating to Celestial Court was punishable by death. Some 12 Fruit members weren't privy to them either. No wonder why Supreme and Immortal Pagoda held such pivotal positions in the upper continents. This was especially true for Supreme. Putting strength aside, Only those who have contributed and gained the trust of Celestial Court could gain insight into certain secrets. There must be mighty monsters in Celestial Court. A neutral Dao Lord said. In the past, his group had attempted to learn more information to no avail. We were well liked, that's all. Supreme said. I'm actually interested to see what they have given you, to have such confidence. Li Chia smiled. If you two leave now, I will spare you. Otherwise, only death awaits. His declaration suffocated the listeners since no one doubted him right now. This could be Supreme and Immortal Pagoda's last day in this world. They themselves knew that Li Chia was not merely boasting. Nonetheless, Supreme maintained his initial stance. I will not abandon my duty. My apologies, sir. Very well. I will give you the chance to show me your true ace cards given by Celestial Court. This is not the time to hold back. Li Chia said. Sir, if you are willing, we can have a formal discussion. Immortal Pagoda was many things, prideful, arrogant, imperious. However, he was no idiot and understood that fighting Li Chia was rather unwise. You two are not qualified to negotiate with me. I am being awfully merciful and patient right now. Li Chia shook his head. It was either his way or death. This was already his being polite and patient as well. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda were unreachable for many others but unqualified when speaking to Li Chia. The current situation instilled despair into the members of Heaven and Divine Alliance. How could they ever hope to beat Li Chia? Sir, killing us changes nothing in the grand scheme of things. Supreme took a deep breath and said, Indeed, it changes nothing, but there is a start to everything. Since the two of you wish to toil for Celestial Court, I will start with you too, and it won't be longer until I finish off Celestial Court as well. At that point, the race and the people will only exist in the past. Li Chia said nonchalantly. Li Chia had mentioned this goal before, but now, it seemed to be concrete and coming along soon. Could he actually destroy Celestial Court? The Duck Egg Buyer and many others have failed. Seems like we must fight. Supreme said solemnly. This won't be much of a fight. The destruction of Celestial Court shall start with your death. Li Chia smiled. I know we are overestimating ourselves, but let us witness your invincibility again, sir. Immortal Pagoda laughed. Show me what Celestial Court had invested for the two of you. Li Chia remarked. Chapter 5463. Scrap Metals from Celestial Court. Sir, we are ready for another lesson. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda exchanged glances before preparing for battle. Supreme stood with Heaven Alliance and Immortal Pagoda was with Divine Alliance. Gentlemen, are we as one? Supreme glanced at his fellow members. To the death. They shouted in unison. Yes, to the death. Supreme roared back in high morale. Please lend me a hand. Immortal Pagoda told the remnants of Divine Alliance. We shall do our best. Divine Alliance will never falter. Their morale seemed high as well after becoming a part of Celestial Court. Very well. Immortal Pagoda always looked magnificent whether in victory or defeat. His aura and presence didn't wane in the slightest. They once again focused on controlling the tower and the hook, shifting them away from the prisoners. All Things and the others heaved a sigh of relief. They moved away from the battlefield instead of helping Li Chia since he didn't need them. Doing so might only annoy him. Sir, I'm afraid we will have to offend you. I hope you understand since this is a fight to the death. Supreme entered the formation controlling Celestial Tower. No need for apologies. I don't mind sending all of you to the next journey. Li Chia smiled. Well, get started then. Supreme understood how precarious this would be, but they were determined to continue. Kill. Immortal Pagoda controlled the hook with all of his power. Kill. The members from both alliances let out a rallying cry as well. Boom! The eruption of their power and vitality was a sight to behold. /P, just a single conqueror alone could leave everyone breathless. All of them channeling at the same time stretched out the fabrics of space and reality. The tower became resplendent. Its mere presence alone became unbearable for anyone beneath. No cultivators could stay alive while being targeted. The hook, on the other hand, lacked flashiness but made up for this in sharpness. Its glint alone could reap the lives of conquerors and Dao lords. The two artifacts reached their strongest state, capable of blowing through stars as if they were straw boats. Mortals and cultivators in the upper continents were paralyzed on the ground, lacking the strength and courage to face this terrifying disaster. They felt as if an apocalypse was incoming. Go! Supreme and Immortal Pagoda attacked Xueqi in unison. The tower was the first to fly toward his position. The space around him didn't just collapse but melted into nothingness. Being reduced to ashes and pieces still meant existing in some ways. This was a complete erasure of everything around him. The hook appeared at the same time, resembling the scythe of a death god, sharp enough to cut down top cultivators like tofu. Boom! Time came to a stop as Xueqi did the impossible, raising the tower with one hand and holding the hook with the other. OVLB1N spectators couldn't help but gasp in astonishment. He was using his bare hands to stop the empowered artifacts. Anyone else could have been obliterated and sliced to pieces by them. Not Xueqi. Of course, they all knew how terrifying Xueqi was, but their jaw still dropped to the ground. All things and Sword Queen couldn't have done this. Not even the mighty Calamity Dao Lord. His shell couldn't have endured the onslaught. These pieces of scrap metals could have been effective in the past, but now, completely worthless in my eyes. Xueqi smiled and stunned his opponents. They were already giving their all, yet their ace cards meant nothing to Xueqi. Chapter 5464. Can't even be an appetizer if audio player doesn't work. Press stop then play button again. Chapter 5464. Can't even be an appetizer. Xueqi then raised one leg up. The stars and the world itself moved to his rhythm. It became the only thing that mattered in the universe. Nothing else had the same grip. Myriad laws and mysteries of the Tao became mere specks of dust before his foot, being lifted up as well. Spectators had the illusion that this was the foot of heaven and earth. Boom! He stomped at the suppressive momentum of the tower and hook. They were made from incredible metals and treasures, currently empowered by numerous capable cultivators. Their momentum empowered by the formations couldn't be underestimated. No single soul could muster this level of power. This was the pinnacle of teamwork and resources, the highest achievement of cultivation in the upper continents. Nov. Elbina multicolored radiance erupted as all of the power in the artifacts tried to stop him. The combined effort through many generations of heaven and divine alliance broke down in the blink of an eye. Everyone else in charge of the formation was smashed down to the ground as well, resulting in broken bones and heavy loss of blood. They felt as if they were ants being stomped down by a merciless human, unable to resist. They groaned in pain while enduring the pressure. Spectators from a distance trembled in horror. Although they were fortunate enough to not be the target of this cosmic force, they still ached all over and had a hard time breathing. Their legs buckled as they witnessed this spectacle. The momentums of the artifacts collapsed first, and so did their physical frame. The materials gifted by Celestial Court were all destroyed today. Celestial Tower allowed Heaven Alliance to dominate for eras. This only stopped when the people managed to build Haven Bulwark. Today, Xueqi brought an end to the tower. Supreme and the others eventually got up. The shift in pose caused them to vomit blood, but putting physical injuries aside, their confidence was shattered by the stomp as well. Everyone could tell that he would have no problem killing all of them in just a second. The disparity in power was insurmountable. How many Alliance members still had the courage to face him? Death didn't deter them at first. However, their Tao heart was crushed now, leaving them with nothing but despair. Struggling was useless. Their lifelong achievements with the Tao were not worth mentioning. All of their hard work became meaningless. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda turned pale. The two of them have dominated for so long and had entered Celestial Court before. Nonetheless, they were certain that Xueqi was the strongest existence they had seen thus far. Is this it? Not enough to be an appetizer, Xueqi said, pouring salt on the wounds of his opponents. Chapter 5465. Destined for greatness. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda felt their legs shaking, not out of fear but out of injuries from the stomp earlier. Their immortal shell was nearly destroyed despite possessing the full forces of the alliances. They exchanged glances and took a deep breath, gathering their vitality and confidence once more. They regained their proud stance, but the same couldn't be said about their allies. Some harbored wishes to retreat because this was a suicidal mission. They had dominated their entire life and never feared anyone. Fear was an emotion they once felt during their youth and cultivation journey. Eventually, they overcame it and reached the top of the world. Although they weren't as strong as Supreme and other apex cultivators, they believed that this was only temporary. As long as they could stay alive and maintain this road, they could be the last ones smiling. Such things happened repeatedly in history, the weak eventually catching up and surpassing stronger cultivators. Thus, fear wouldn't be the right word, only temporary apprehension. Unfortunately, this emotion resurfaced in their heart after being stomped by Li Qie. It crushed their confidence and Dao heart. They looked up and saw the immeasurable gap. They couldn't see the end of the Dao path while Li Qie was already standing there. This was a hopeless fight. Therefore, some among them wavered and wanted to escape. The solidarity had been shattered. Not long ago, they were willing to throw their lives away for their belief and mission. Now, the absolute zero chance of success made them abandon their conviction. This was the prelude to the collapse of the Dao heart and the start of their downfall. They understood the frightening consequences of this. They attempted to strengthen their Dao heart, summoning the courage to face Li Qie. Events flashed in their eyes in this split second, harking the early days of cultivation. When they were weak, they felt the same fear towards stronger cultivators. In the end, they eventually defeated these powerful foes and went farther and farther. This was a similar situation and they couldn't yield now. The first to stabilize were naturally Supreme and Immortal Pagoda. The former remained calm and collected while the latter was still the heaven's favorite. Conquerors and Dragon Lords couldn't afford to yield. Giving up meant weakening their Dao heart, something unbecoming of their status. Your perseverance is commendable. Li Qie praised the courageous foes. You have helped me understand my Dao heart more, sir. Supreme took a deep breath. You should be proud of your comprehension ability. Li Qie said. Well, I am certainly ready to die today for the sake of learning more about the Dao heart. Immortal Pagoda laughed and interjected. All things and the others had respect for their mortal foes. These two regained their composure and courage in such a short time despite facing Li Qie. Nonetheless, not all agreed with their readiness to die. What was the point of gaining a stronger Dao heart if it meant dying in battle today? However, Supreme and Immortal Pagoda appreciated maintaining their Dao heart. If they could somehow survive, they would be able to go farther than ever before. Plus, they had no regrets if they were to die during a battle. They didn't let down their past self by running away like a coward. This was absolutely the correct path for cultivators. Yes, cultivation is an internal journey, not for the sake of fame and authority nor incredible techniques. Li Qie nodded. Born in this world and destined for greatness, it's a shame that my mission collides with yours, sir. Immortal Pagoda laughed. Let us finish this, sir. Supreme said. They have chased fear away and readied themselves for the second round. Chapter 5466. Primordial Dao Fruit. Everyone watched with bated breath, including the members of Divine and Heaven Alliance. They could no longer join this battle since this was beyond their level. Their ace cards included the Tower and the Hook from Celestial Court. Li Qie swiftly put an end to their artifacts. How could Supreme and Immortal Pagoda stop Li Qie? It didn't matter what they had hiding up their sleeves. Everything seemed rather futile now. This was the last struggle before death. Of course, their fearless determination earned them the respect of the spectators, friends and foes alike. This was especially true for the latter who had experienced the nightmarish defeat just now. Li Qie left a shadow of despair in their mind. Overcoming this in such a short time was far from easy. Have it your way, Li Qie said with a smile. Very well, it concludes today. Supreme smiled and said. Let us fight to the very last breath. Immortal Pagoda laughed and resumed his imperious demeanor. Start, Li Qie said, still looking like a mortal. Alas, everyone had to look up at him now as if he was a colossal giant, the ultimate existence of their world. He held the cosmos in his grasp and all living beings should be prostrating before him. I shall embarrass myself first. Immortal Pagoda soared upward after saying this, looking like a true dragon with an imperial aura. Others couldn't help but cheer for him. In a sense, his strong display was saving the face of conquerors. Everyone trembled before Li Qie earlier, feeling nothing but despair. They couldn't keep their head up while facing him, looking like stray dogs. This completely ruined the image of conquerors and dragon lords. However, Immortal Pagoda was still as proud as before, not looking dejected after losing. He was the embodiment of how a conqueror should be. Boom! He showed his 12 palaces again and the anima tree. Their power engulfed and illuminated the battlefield. His aura still left others breathless. He was weaker than Li Qie but stronger than virtually anyone else. His single Tao fruit emitted primordial rays that could only be seen at the start of the world. Primordial Tao laws mirroring the time of creation also descended. Space sank downward from the weight of his fruit, seemingly unable to accommodate its existence. For most cultivators, their anima tree garnered more attention due to its size and power. However, his impressive tree stood second to the unique fruit hanging on the tip of the tree. The primordial affinity of the fruit seemed to be one step above the anima affinity of the tree. Rumble! A maelstrom eventually formed around the primordial fruit, causing the crowd to gasp in astonishment. This legendary fruit deserved all of its wondrous tales. Chapter 5467. Immortal from above. As the rotation of the spatial maelstrom intensified, it started pulling everything inside. The primordial fruit latched onto several things and pulled them out. Rumble! Loud detonations hurt the eardrums. Space and time crumbled as a result. After one final bang, 4 portals appeared behind Immortal Pagoda Conqueror. Unlike regular portals with small openings, they connected the 4 worlds to the battlefield. The first was a decrepit red sky engulfed by nefarious forces. Another had nothing but molten liquid surging chaotically along devastating flames. The third was inscrutable with runes and mysteries. The fourth was an empty expanse of the void. The Broken Realms. Everyone immediately recognized them. Evil Reborn, Red Flood, Ultimate, and Perish. Rumble! Loud explosions emanated from them as if certain things were awakening. They turned out to be pagodas instead of colossal monsters. A total of 4 appeared. 1 in each realm. Mark of the primordial fruit manifested onto the surface, activating the pagodas. Violent forces erupted in the 4 worlds as the pagodas turned into maelstrom as well, absorbing the powers around them. Is he trying to control the 4 broken realms? Spectators became startled and shuddered. Of course, they could also see that this was a premeditated plan, not something concocted out of thin air. The 4 pagodas inside the realms were made from priceless metals. Ordinary conquerors and Tao lords couldn't muster this many resources. Moreover, he imbued the mark of his primordial fruit on them as well. His fruit served as the very foundation for the pagodas to borrow the power of these broken realms, seemingly impossible to duplicate. This is above what Illumination Conqueror did. Someone commented. Illumination borrowed the power of the illusory realms, albeit only a small portion. Most crucially, he didn't do it alone, needing to rely on a sacrificial ceremony performed by his men. Therefore, Immortal Pagoda Conqueror was clearly one step higher in this regard. Can any other conqueror or Tao lord do something like this? Another couldn't help but praise. Depending on his mastery of this method, he could be virtually unbeatable among his peers. Several apex cultivators would need to band together against him. Thus, putting Li Qie aside, would he be the strongest cultivator right now in the upper continents? So he was holding back. One spectator commented. It was clear as day that Immortal Pagoda was still keeping this a secret until the last moment. Immortal from above. Supreme murmured. Boom! The sky shattered, leaving behind a massive hole with power oozing down like an ocean. The ocean of light immediately engulfed everyone, capable of reducing the battlefield to pieces. A majestic figure descended from the hole, looking like it was made from the purest stars. Its power was proportional to its gigantic frame. What is this thing? Everyone could tell that this wasn't a living being. Is it a metal giant? They thought about the giants back in Imperial Attendant City. Chapter 5468. Matchless momentum. However, the metal giants back in Imperial Attendant weren't this big in size. Thus, they thought about the combined transformations summoned by Li Qie. Upon closer inspection, they weren't the same metal giants. The ones back in Imperial Attendant were clearly built by men. Of course, they had no other information about the method or actual material. On the other hand, this giant was made from the power of stars, not metals. It's a supreme momentum manifesting into a physical frame. A powerful dragon lord said. I see. Others nearby responded. The question is, what is the source of this momentum? All Things Tao Lord carefully analyzed the giant. Others activated their heavenly gaze and couldn't find any energy channel empowering the giant. A while ago, they saw 2 formidable momentums from the tower and the hook. Their source came from a foundation embedded in heaven and divine alliance on top of the precious metals. However, the giant seemed different, whether it be its source or material composition. It's purposely hidden, not something that can be done in a day or two. A member of Divine Alliance said. For example, if they had wanted to hide the source of their hook, they could have done so. However, since building the momentum for the hook required numerous cultivators, there was no point in trying to hide an open secret. I didn't know we had something like this still. Another said. Members of Divine and Heaven Alliance were confused about this giant's existence. They should have caught some information about it prior. Supreme couldn't have been the only one working on this due to its scale. Celestial Court. All things and his allies understood what was going on. They prepared many things on the upper continents and now, they trust Supreme enough with them. Principal Conqueror understood. Is this how they have absolute control over Heaven Alliance? A Dragon Lord shuddered. Celestial Court had hidden a grand momentum in the upper continent unbeknown to anyone. Only the loyal Supreme had access to it. Was it a way to prevent problems from Heaven Alliance in case of having traitors? Or was it to keep it an absolute secret from anyone? An ace card to be used during an existential crisis? The upper echelon from Heaven Alliance didn't feel great about it. They had been supporting Celestial Court and the race for so long. How could this be viewed as anything but a lack of trust? It was one thing to be skeptical of Divine Alliance. After all, they didn't necessarily support Celestial Court. Alas, Heaven Alliance had proven its loyalty over the eras. I think only Supreme and Immortal Pagoda knew about this. An emperor said, and only Supreme has control over it. The rumor is true. All things gazed at the giant and said, they have so much confidence in Supreme. What can we do? He is actually from Celestial Court. This notion ran through the minds of Heaven Alliance's members. Supreme actually came from Celestial Court while others joined later. His background was as prestigious as can be. Of course, he became the leader of Heaven Alliance due to his own charisma and power. Nonetheless, some loyalists felt betrayed by this revelation. Celestial Court still viewed them as outsiders despite their contributions. Risking their lives in the past meant nothing. Boom! Meanwhile, Supreme leaped into the sky and entered the giant, assuming control. Chapter 5469. Skeletal Sword, Boom! Supreme took control of the mysterious momentum's power and channeled it into his body, making it his own. His new majestic force drowned the 9 heavens and 10 earths. This left the crowd speechless because this was one step above the tower and the hook. The latter required power stemming from a formation to reach their peak state. However, this momentum was powering Supreme instead, shrouding him with an ultimate armor set. Normally, armors were still external items with limitations. In this case, it became a part of his body. Its power could be used with full mastery. This was beyond the ability of anyone in the upper continent. All of the best cultivators could have worked together and still wouldn't be able to duplicate this momentum. It allowed the user to gain its full power without any backlash or complications. Boom! Spectators couldn't find words to describe the empowered Supreme. Perfection was the only thing on their mind, whether it be his appearance, aura, or Tao power. He was already an immaculate entity standing at the apex before this. This fusion boosted his power considerably, allowing him to wield the power of the entire upper continents. He became one with heaven and earth just like a true immortal. A while back, Eternal Conqueror displayed a time-worn aura. Supreme possessed something even greater at the moment. No wonder why Celestial Court didn't let anyone else know about this. One man alone can wield it. A spectator said. This giant momentum was entirely different from the tower and the hook. In fact, Supreme might have enough power right now to attack any location in the immortal content, Celestial Court included. This was the reason why they kept it a secret and only gave it to a trustworthy member. Sword, heed my call. Supreme uttered. Another sword came from above and all other swords suddenly lost their hum. What? Sword Sea, Sword Queen, and Dark Frost trembled after sensing this. Their swords became silent even before that sword could be seen clearly. Keep in mind that given their mastery of this Tao, their swords were also wondrous artifacts. They have been gestated by their owner's sword Tao, so being suppressed was an entirely new thing for them. Since even these apex swords were affected, no other blade in the entire world could make a sound now. Sword users could no longer unsheath their blades. Even if someone was strong enough to force the issue, Their sword had lost the will to fight, becoming utterly useless. This was a testament to the might of the descending sword, something superior to the rest. Everyone took a closer look at the blade wielded by Supreme, a skeletal sword. Just looking at it froze spectators, leaving them breathless. They suddenly saw a terrible scene, the blade floating in an ancient epoch while consuming all the bones of that period's inhabitants. Billions and billions of creatures including true dragons, phoenixes, gods, and cultivators. They once were the lords of the epoch only to be reaped in the end. Their true bones, blood, and lives were all devoured for the creation of this skeletal sword. After all the living beings were gone, the land itself was refined and robbed of its essences, all for the sake of creating an epoch-level weapon. Chapter 5470. Sir, can you stop the force of an epoch? Holding the sword in his grasp was akin to holding an entire epoch. The world trembled before its emergence, let alone its inhabitants. Apex cultivators couldn't hold the sword, but Supreme was able to do so due to his current empowered state. The mysterious momentum seemingly possessed endless power. Perhaps it was blessed by a supreme existence previously. Everyone gasped at this sight. All things and his peers understood that their current selves wouldn't be able to control this sword. If they were to forcefully hold this sword, their body would instantly crumble despite possessing an immortal shell. The rumor is true, Celestial Court does have this sword, a paragon artifact from an old epoch. An emperor from Heaven Alliance murmured. I can't believe it, they left a paragon artifact down here? A monarch didn't understand the reason why. Some of the top cultivators have heard rumors of Celestial Court possessing a paragon artifact. However, no one could actually wield it, hence its disappearance in history. In theory, it should be well guarded in Celestial Court. Just how much trust did Celestial Court have in Supreme? It's to kill an overlord. An ancient emperor speculated. Wait, the existence of this sword is a sin, that's why it couldn't be left behind in Celestial Court or it would have been taken away. A conqueror heard something like this before. Not necessarily, maybe Supreme is granted the sword for a battle, he'll have to return it later. Another came up with a different theory. Regardless of the actual answer, this showed just how much trust Celestial Court had in Supreme. Heaven Burial Conqueror and the lords during time immemorial might not had this privilege. After all, a paragon artifact was an actual threat to Celestial Court. Its power could cut through the barriers and formations. Sword Emperor who had toiled for Celestial Court for eras didn't have access to it either. Perhaps only Light Dragon Conqueror was equal to Supreme in this regard. Now, everyone understood the reason for the supreme momentum hidden in the upper continents. It was so that someone could obtain this incredible shell for the sake of controlling the paragon sword. The user would be able to easily dominate the upper continents, hence Celestial Court's careful selection of Supreme. If Supreme harbored any intention of betraying them, they would lose control over the upper continents since anyone sent down would be swiftly killed. This was similar to what Eternal Conqueror did in the lower continents. What do you two think? Can you wield the sword? Sword C asked Dark Frost and Sword Queen. Sword Queen didn't respond while Dark Frost put on a serious expression before replying. If I muster all of my strength, maybe I can swing it twice, but most likely once. Same for me. Holding it alone will destroy my body. Sword C agreed after assessing the power within the skeletal sword. Sir, please give me pointers. Supreme looked invincible at this moment since he could defeat all the Apex cultivators together. Li Qie seemed amused to see the sword and said, True Bones, finally showing up again. Looks like your Celestial Court has a capable ally, to be able to come up with this wielding method. They didn't forge it and must have needed to use a borrowed shell in the past. Incredible insight, so you are familiar with it, sir. Supreme praised. True Bones. Everyone repeated the name of this paragon artifact. It was forged by a monstrous overlord after sacrificing their epoch. A truly dreadful tale. Celestial Court eventually found it, but no one there could actually use it. Their ultimate masters couldn't show their faces to the world. Thus, they had to take over a mighty cultivator's body to wield the sword temporarily. Of course, this had serious consequences for the unlucky cultivator chosen to be taken over. Because of this, they rarely used it in history until an unknown guest came along. This person had vast knowledge of True Bones and came up with the current method to wield it. Do you think that this is enough to kill me? Li Qie smiled. Sir, can you stop an attack with the force of an epoch? Supreme asked with a serious expression. The crowd wondered as well. No apex cultivator would be able to survive a swing from this sword. But what about Li Qie? He might be the only one capable of this feat. Chapter 5471, Celestial Court's Three Immortals. I'm rather curious. Who is your master in Celestial Court? Li Qie smirked while asking. None expected him to shift the conversation. Strangely enough, his closest allies didn't know the answer either. His background was a mystery. Some believed that he came from Celestial Court, but his allies didn't think so. He was born in the upper continents as far as they knew. The journey remained unknown, but he eventually made it to Celestial Court at a young age. Another popular speculation included his being born in Celestial Court but was sent down to the upper continents for training. Li Qie's question piqued everyone's interest. Who was his master? I am just a junior fortunate enough to earn the love of the seniors in Celestial Court. Supreme humbly answered. Li Qie shook his head and said, You're not fooling anyone. Nether Emperor and the likes are not worthy to be your master. His disciple wouldn't be as trusted, in fact. He himself wouldn't be given true bones and this supreme momentum. Senior Nether was once the Lord of Celestial Court, a true paragon. Supreme didn't answer directly. Nether Emperor was an unfamiliar name now. Only the oldest emperors and monarchs knew of him. The current lord was Sword Emperor. Nether was his predecessor. Sword Emperor was a rising star and contributed greatly during immemorial epic war. Nether abdicated afterward and gave his role to Sword. Sword's success also incited criticism and ridicule in secrecy. The reason was rather simple. His background. 142. 93. 60. 102 Back during time immemorial, the Qian were branded as sinners by Celestial Court. Thus, they retaliated and led the people against the oppressors. Among their 9 heavenly emperors, they had the unbeatable World Emperor and the brilliant Sword Emperor. All things shook his head, unaware of the answer since he wasn't involved in the war back then. The old geezer has legends too, but I think only 2 people have seen him before. Sword Sea Dao Lord joined in. Who are the 2? Yi Fantian asked curiously. Zhao Heng and Duality Master. Zhao Heng's visit was too long ago for the details to be known, but Duality Master had visited. Rumor has it they even shared a drink together. Sword Sea said. How strong is this cultivator? Yi Fantian asked again. I do not know. From pieces here and there is a chance that he was the founder of Celestial Court. Of course, I have no solid evidence. The founder of Celestial Court. Yi Fantian was shaken since one could imagine his power after hearing this. How could he still be alive? Is this duty or just being a cannon fodder? Li Qie smiled while staring at Supreme. A great favor must be repaid by loyalty. Supreme said, Sir, you must step over my body first if you wish to destroy Celestial Court. My bones shall be the first step of your path. You have good self-awareness among many other things. All valuable characteristics. Li Qie clapped and said, Fine, put down true bones and you may leave this place unscathed. Everyone took a deep breath. Someone of Li Qie's level didn't need to bluster. Was he confident in defeating True Bones and killing Supreme? They glanced at Supreme. Would he continue in spite of the odds? I am grateful for your affection, sir. But my devotion isn't mere empty words. Supreme shook his head. Chapter 5472, Lord of the World. Very well, shall we get started? Li Qie asked with a smile. Sir, we await your guidance. Immortal Pagoda Conqueror said before gathering his power. He had the might of the 4 broken realms behind him, channeling their forces through the 4 pagodas. They empowered his primordial fruit, turning him into a gigantic lord wielding 4 different forces. Each of his breaths could release this power, easily destroying a continent or killing a top cultivator. Although he was already stronger than virtually anyone prior to this, his power surged to an unsurpassable level. The heavens' favorite. Any spectator would have this notion in their mind. Now, his prophecy of being the greatest was being fulfilled. 142. 93. 60. 102 This was different from Supreme's form as well. The latter was given to him by Celestial Court while Immortal Pagoda most likely prepared the pagodas in the 4 realms himself. Come. Li Jie smiled and waited for the enemies to attack first. Everyone understood that Supreme and Immortal Pagoda Conqueror were the true lords of the upper continent since they had access to these ace cards. They simply kept it hidden for a multitude of reasons. Alas, Li Jie has forced them to show their hands, pushing them to the edge of despair. Li Jie smiled and became resplendent with an immortal light. Each of his movements was accompanied by the Grand Tao and all the laws of this world. Although he still didn't activate his aura and cultivation, everything within the 6 continents bent to his will. His fusion with the world calmed everyone down instantly. The apocalyptic dread from the 2 attacks suddenly vanished. As long as he stood at the forefront, the forces of destruction wouldn't be able to get past his mastery of the Grand Tao and all other affinities. Other self-proclaimed lords in the 6 continents were mere pretenders, unable to reach the apex. The supreme forces of the 2 attacks suddenly exploded the moment he raised his hands. They caused devastating damage to the battlefield but didn't hurt him at all. He stopped the skeletal swords with 2 fingers, reserving his palm for the Immortal Pagoda. This scene left spectators breathless. Chapter 5473. A certain someone. The insurmountable odds didn't apply to Li Jie. Although the crowd was shocked by the grand spectacle, they didn't find the result surprising. They felt something about his current state, that he was one with the world. No, he was the high heaven itself. The high heaven was a concept beyond their grasp, unimaginable and unfathomable. Nonetheless, they could tell that this entity was true, evident by the terrifying tribulations. Li Jie was just as unstoppable as the heavenly tribulations. The skeletal sword and the combined might of the 4 broken realms were overwhelming. Just not when the target was Li Jie. He was one with heaven and earth. Everything else could be destroyed and he would still exist. Some insightful cultivators gained a new understanding of anima and the true self. Was this the highest level? Anima, seeing the high heaven at the end of the path, one of them murmured. Prior to this, they had a vague idea of the end of the path after cultivating anima. Alas, something flashed in their mind after seeing Li Jie's current state. Done. Me seeing the high heaven. The empowered Supreme and Immortal Pagoda became emotional as well, reaching the point of being enlightened. Could this be the final destination of their path, the end of the Tao? One could now hear lightning crackles and thunderous explosions above Li Jie as if a tribulation was forming. This only lasted for a few seconds before receding. A valiant woman in the upper continent looked up and saw Li Jie's current state, murmuring, "Is it necessary to display the high heaven's appearance when garnering this little power? Show off." Meanwhile, Li Jie prevented the sword and the pagoda from moving an inch. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda could see that this was futile. "Senior, lend me a hand." Immortal Pagoda shouted to everyone's astonishment. Who in the upper continents was qualified to help him now, given his empowered state? Moreover, Senior? Celestial Court, descend. Supreme shouted as well. Everyone became tense and felt something ominous was unraveling. A figure appeared in the deepest region of Ultimate, a place known by cultivators yet unexplorable. The Tao profundity there was beyond the reach of apex cultivators. Space and time morphed chaotically around him, unable to maintain their original form. This caused him to be ethereal like a shadow. Nonetheless, they felt that he had understood all the mysteries and truths. No secrets in this world remained for him. Boom! He raised one hand and took control of the 4 broken realms, activating the final radiance of a setting sun and extracting all of their power. Rumble! The upper continents couldn't contain such a frightening force and started expanding violently. Storms and gales manifested into reality, ravaging the continents. Profound Emperor! An ancient Grand Emperor saw him and gasped. Profound Emperor? This was a nearly forgotten title. An immemorial being who was the founder of Divine Alliance. In the distant epoch, only a few cultivators could be considered his equals, the most notable being Pure Wood Divine Emperor and World Emperor. He disappeared not long after starting Divine Alliance. People speculated that he had chosen to live reclusively in Celestial Court or passed away from old age. None expected to see him in Ultimate. Some have gone there before without knowing that it was his abode. Chapter 5474. Secret of the momentum. His appearance shocked all the spectators, causing them to gasp. During Immemorial Epoch War, he stood equal to Crimson Emperor of Celestial Court and Immortal Monarch Yi of Immortal Tao City. Crimson fell in the battle while the monarch no longer appeared in public. Today, Profound was finally seen again. Boom! At the same time, a primordial light descended, one that could only be seen during the start of time. The image of Celestial Court manifested into reality, prompting others to kneel on the ground. However, the most frightening aspect was the bright stars rotating around the court while exuding an unrecognizable power. What is this affinity? Others haven't seen this type of power before. A monarch became overwhelmed with emotions and shouted, "It's from a heavenly treasure, he's borrowing its power." Sure enough, this unknown affinity eventually attached itself and blessed Supreme. Clank! True Bones was finally able to display its true power. Done. May a terrible phenomenon emerged behind the sword. Skeletons belonging to true dragons, the strongest monarchs, Tao ancestors. The strongest beings of an epoch were robbed of their bones and vitality, all for the sake of creating true bones. With the help of an unknown heavenly treasure, Supreme gained the force of an overlord capable of using true bones to its fullest potential. While everyone thought Celestial Court was on the verge of descending, a golden river shockingly appeared with the yin and yang separated. Activate! Someone shouted and destroyed the visual phenomenon, revealing a hidden peak. This was hidden by a supreme method, but when the image of the court appeared, the stealth method was at its weakest. The attacker was none other than an immortal emperor, a middle-aged man wearing a yellow outfit with a hat, looking like a laborer. Immortal Emperor Ming-Du. Everyone was surprised to see him floating in space near the mysterious peak. Was he not a member of Heaven Alliance? Why did he interfere with Supreme Summon? As a senior member of Heaven Alliance, he was tasked with defending it during the war. Otherwise, the people might take advantage of their absence and attack their home. Boom! He destroyed the peak as well, revealing another hidden entity, a giant made from peerless metals. It slightly resembled the metal giants from Imperial Attendant City but was fundamentally different. He then tore the giant apart, exposing the dimension inside. It was nothing more than a shell to hide strange effigies within. No, these were living people lying on circular slabs positioned on top of a Tao altar. The entire platform was inscribed with mysterious runes, channeling energy from living beings and using them as batteries for the sake of activating momentum. The internal hull of the giant had countless Tao stones and refined jades, all part of a supreme momentum's framework. So this is the source of the supreme momentum. An emperor took a deep breath. Putting the immense resources aside, they used living cultivators as fuel for the momentum. They're ancient emperors and monarchs. Someone recognized these cultivators stuck in stasis. That's Chen Dao Heaven Emperor. Didn't all of them die back then? A Grand Emperor from the Heaven race recognized the founder of the Chen. Chen Dao Heaven Emperor was rumored to be the second Grand Emperor after Pure Wood Divine Emperor. Rumor has it that every top member of the Chen was killed with the exception of Sword Emperor. Look over there, majestic Emperor of the Diviners. A different monarch saw another person and whispered, "He betrayed Celestial Court during immemorial epoch war." The living batteries included members from both the people and the race. Their descendants thought that they had fallen during immemorial epoch war. As for Li Qia, he focused on a woman who was sealed as well. She still looked young and wore a gray dress, nothing more. Her simplicity was unique in that it made everything else seem superfluous. She was a deadly weapon, devoid of unnecessary components. Chapter 5475. Heaven Razor. The woman was beautiful with gentle features and porcelain skin. Her eyes remained open in her frozen state, looking like jewels. Her figure was just as immaculate, slender yet curvy in the right places. A golden ribbon was tied around her waist and accentuated her alluring curves. Unfortunately, most would avert their gaze due to her intense murderous aura. It took the form of flames around her, causing others to back away. She seemed to be the king of all assassins, but alas, she was still captured and being used as a battery like the rest. Li Qia's eyes flashed menacingly after seeing her. Everyone else was shocked as well to see the cultivators hidden behind the source of the supreme momentum. Some of these prisoners were ancient beings that once dominated their eras. Supreme was certainly not the person who came up with this. He was yet to be born during their era. The only answer was Celestial Court. Even members of Heaven Alliance shuddered after seeing this revelation. Perhaps one day, they would be sacrificed as well if Celestial Court deemed it necessary. No wonder why this had to be kept a secret. A monarch said with a solemn tone. Outside of strategic reasons, they had no choice but to keep this a secret. Otherwise, they risk the animosity of both the race and the people. Some might start leaving Heaven Alliance as a result. No one would find out without immortal Emperor Ming-Du's interference. A Dao Lord said. Done. This was no coincidence. The source would still have been hidden behind the gigantic shell if it wasn't for Ming-Du's attack. He waited for this exact moment to show the world what Celestial Court had been hiding. Boom! Profound Emperor channeled enough power in the 4 broken realms, clearly having more mastery in this process than Immortal Pagoda Conqueror. Clank! Meanwhile, the Supreme Momentum still powered True Bones, preparing for another assault. However, something massive flew out of Ultiamt, the same entity that had escaped from Lesser Firmament. This time around, a primordial radiance ignited and chased away the fog shrouding the entity. This revealed a middle-aged man. A dark wound on his chest started closing as well. 3 souls as one. He roared thunderously. Inside Lesser Firmament, the man wearing Moon Embrace lost control of his body and started flying toward the horizon. As for Firmament Godchild who had gotten far away, he was still lifted off the ground. He shouted, "Damn it all, I just want to be free, why is this happening to me? I don't want to shoulder the heaven anymore. Not like this." Unfortunately, his complaints fell on deaf ears. He was still dragged in the direction of Ultimate. It only took a second for the two to arrive and combine together with the recently recovered man. The 3 souls became one again. Boom! An eruption of light temporarily blinded everyone. Once it dispersed, everyone could see the man clearly. Someone capable of shouldering the high heaven. The gods and emperors paid tribute to his greatness. The myriad Tao paled in comparison. One step of his could cause the celestials to rain from the sky. He could overturn the ages with a mere gesture. A truly unbeatable being. Profound Emperor's expression soured after seeing him. World Emperor of the Qian. Many ancient emperors and monarchs couldn't believe their own eyes. That's World Emperor? Others had heard of his legends before. He stood at the apex during time immemorial and even the previous epoch. Rumor has it that he was the lord of all 3 races, even going as far as reigning over Celestial Court. The Qian certainly dominated with their 9 emperors. However, he was still the most important factor. Even the arrogant Crimson Emperor couldn't defeat him in combat. He was the first to stand against Celestial Court's judgment against the people, leading his clan against tyranny. Unfortunately, Sword Emperor betrayed him and in just one night, his clan disappeared from the world. His tragic fate made countless people sigh with regret over the years. Today, it looked like he had escaped with severe injuries. Some of his clan members were still alive, albeit being used as living batteries for Celestial Court. With his injuries healed and his souls as one, he awed the world with his presence once more. Nostalgia swept through the old cultivators near the battlefield. Can Profound Emperor stop him? They could tell that a battle between these two was inevitable. Both top-tier members of the 3 races. Chapter 5476. My mission is over, boom! World Emperor activated his immortal armament for a direct attack on Profound Emperor. The immense distance between them meant nothing as a torrent of power soared forward. Profound no longer had time to help Immortal Pagoda, needing to use his Tao to stop World Emperor. They turned all of Ultimate into a battlefield. Time to end this. Li Qie leaped into the air, still accompanied by the myriad Tao since he was the paragon of this world. Whoosh! He swung his hand like an axe, no longer holding back. Supreme's True Bones and Immortal Pagoda's empowered state were certainly strong. Alas, they couldn't stop an attack from the high heaven. He destroyed Supreme's momentum and crushed the power channels from the 4 broken realms. His aura affected Ultimate, dispelling all the Tao there. This caused Profound Emperor to spit out a mouthful of blood. Done. Mei He understood the gravity of the situation and immediately fled for his life, running through a portal prepared deeper inside Ultimate. World immediately gave chase and disappeared as well. Ah! Supreme couldn't withstand the blow without the supreme momentum. His sacred fruits and tree disintegrated instantly. Immortal Pagoda didn't fare any better. His supreme Tao and everything else were destroyed with the exception of his primordial fruit, purposely left intact by Li Qie. Silence returned to the scene after Li Qie obliterated his opponents. The phenomenon of celestial court and the pulsing power of the unknown heavenly treasure were eradicated as well. The chop earlier by Li Qie seemed akin to a blow from the high heaven, fully suppressing powerful cultivators and mortals. "You are unbeatable, sir. My mission is over." Supreme uttered his last words before turning stiff and dead. "Ha ha ha. I witnessed invincibility, no regrets." Immortal Pagoda laughed as well before coughing out blood. His legs kicked out one last time before following Supreme to the grave. The crowd needed a moment to digest the death of these two apex cultivators. Both were destined for greatness, and sure enough, they lived up to everyone's expectations. They still deserved respect despite dying to Li Qie today. The two carried out their duty and died valiantly in battle. Their era was now over, ended by Li Qie, who didn't need to resort to using a weapon. Everyone trembled after recalling how easy it was for Li Qie. What a shame, they were brilliant. Someone commented while watching Li Qie taking away true bones and the primordial Dao fruit. "Emperor, you are invincible." A monarch bowed in Li Qie's direction. Others regained their wits and also bowed, realizing that this was a being far beyond their reach. Supreme and Immortal Pagoda could have massacred all of them earlier, yet they couldn't last a single move against Li Qie. This battle ended in no time at all. Since Li Qie showed no intention of pursuing the issue, members of Heaven Alliance quietly retreated after Supreme's death. To try rising up against Li Qie was a suicidal endeavor. Having the number advantage didn't matter in the slightest. From now on, Heaven Alliance will only exist on paper. All Things and his allies heaved a sigh of relief. Heaven Alliance had all but disbanded. Divine Alliance wasn't in a better state either. Their mission of protecting the people was finished and they could focus on cultivation again. There was no need to act as protectors any longer. Peace at last. Mortals back in the upper continents couldn't witness the fight and the splendor of the emperors. Nonetheless, the pressure was now gone and they could finally stand up again. Warm sunlight returned and made them feel lucky to be alive. Some thought that perhaps it would be better for the world if there were no emperors and gods, for they were potential sources of calamity. They have heard legends about emperor wars before. Nearly experiencing a second one made them pray for a swift end to any conflict. Chapter 5477. Fortune. The crowd stared at Li Qie as if he was the high heaven itself. Jilin, Buddhist emperor and Azure ancestor, took their men closer for an official audience. If it wasn't for their ancestors, they wouldn't have been qualified to pay their respect to Li Qie. This was akin to mortals and regular cultivators wanting to have an audience with a Dao Lord. Just simply impossible. "My lord." Principal Conqueror kneeled before Li Qie along with his descendants. Li Qie had visited the Lu in the past. Alas, he had no ties with them now outside of Principal being wise enough to serve him. Li Qie glanced at them and said, "I shall be leaving soon, and given our fateful connection, you may ask for a fortune." Everyone listened attentively and became envious of the Lu. Although top cultivators didn't necessarily need anything, their sect and clans certainly needed help. To have a fortune from Li Kai meant that their descendants could prosper for eras to come. Everyone else desired a favor from the conquerors, while the conquerors wanted nothing more than to be granted a wish by Li Qie. "You are too kind, my lord," Principal said, "but the Lu has already received your grace in the past, and further greed will only birth complacency and pride. We ask for nothing more." This surprised many top cultivators nearby. This was a once-in-lifetime opportunity, yet Principal politely refused. However, after thinking it through, some thought that this was a reasonable decision. The Lu was already strong enough with ample resources. Their descendants were blessed at birth. Done. Future prosperity depended on their descendants' efforts and had nothing to do with Principal. "That is fine." Li Qie nodded. "Humility is a virtue that can grant stability and peace." "We will not let you down, my lord." Principal bowed again with his descendants. He knew that this might be their last meeting because Li Qie wouldn't just stop at the immortal continent. He would soar to a place unreachable by the likes of them. Li Qie nodded approvingly before gesturing for Li Zhitian to come closer. The latter obeyed and brought his fellow clan members over as well. In reality, they were in a tough position. The Imperial clan was a part of Celestial Court and had been a pillar for Heaven Alliance. Li Qie had stated his goal of attacking Celestial Court, meaning that he would be fighting their ancestors eventually. Therefore, Li Zhitian had no reason or qualifications to see Li Qie. Nonetheless, He was summoned and respectfully accepted the call. Li Qie smiled at him and said, "You have an open mind and an open heart. You do not discriminate between the race or the people. Are you aware of your duties now?" "Young noble, that will be my life goal. I will guarantee peace and never show bias between the two sides. I will not let you down." Li Zhitian understood and kneeled. Li Qie handed him the primordial fruit and said, "Let us see what you can accomplish then." "I humbly accept." Zhitian accepted the primordial fruit. All eyes were on him. Most couldn't use the primordial fruit since they had their own Dao fruits. This didn't mean that the fruit was useless outside of cultivation. The primordial fruit was gained through cultivation or fortune. No one else had access to one otherwise. Since Li Zhitian had one outside of this, it implied that the imperial clan would have a primordial fruit user in the future. An existence comparable to Immortal Pagoda Conqueror or their ancestors, Crimson Emperor and Titanic Conqueror. The group paid respect one more time before leaving. "Benefactor, will you visit Azure Peak again?" Azure Ancestor bowed, aware of how fleeting this moment was. She was different from the others, possessing a special bond with Li Qie. He was there to protect her during the moment of her birth and could be considered her father. "I'm afraid not." Li Qie smiled and shook his head. He then gestured for Li Xiener to come over. "She'll stay in Azure Peak. She will do great things in the future and it is mutually beneficial." Li Qie said. Both didn't have a problem with this. Li Xiener had no home to speak of, so Li Qie purposely set up Azure Peak as a new home for her. This would pave a stable path for her future, not letting her fall into the darkness. The two women bowed one more time and retreated to the side. Li Qie turned his attention toward Yi Fantian and said, "You may tag along with me to train for a bit." This shocked everyone in the audience. By this point, Li Qie's superiority was apparent to all. They thought that he was the embodiment of the high heaven. Apex cultivators were mere insects compared to him. Thus, this invitation took them by surprise. Chapter 5478. Gentle breezes. Yi Fantian became the center of attention since she had just been offered the ultimate fortune. Her future had limitless potential if she were to accept. She was already brilliant for cultivating 12 Dao fruits at the same time, something that had only been done by Light Dragon and Demon Conqueror. By choosing to follow Li Qie, she would undoubtedly exceed her predecessors. Yi Fantian glanced back at Sword C Dao Lord. Although she had left Divine Alliance, she still didn't forget about her roots. "Go, I have nothing more to teach you on this path." Sword C was excited for her and said, "I'll be in isolated cultivation after this for who knows how many years?" Being taught by the young noble is a supreme fortune. He was her unofficial master, but now, she had carved her own path after possessing 12 Dao fruits. He didn't have much to teach her any longer and supported Li Qie's decision. She kneeled before Sword C and performed a full rite while speaking. "It was a blessing of 3 lifetimes to have you as a master. Please accept." With that, she kowtowed 9 times. Everyone understood that she might not return to see Sword C again, unable to repay his kindness. This gesture was warranted, so Sword C didn't stop her. After finishing, she stood up and bowed to those standing behind Swordia. "Seniors, I will not forget your kindness." They had helped with her training and even protected her. "The Dao is endless, but you all will go far." Li Qie then turned toward All Things and his allies. They didn't have a strong connection with Li Qie, so they didn't kneel. All Things was the most polite out of them and bowed. "We will cherish your advice, young noble, and will not stop progressing." Li Qie nodded and didn't say anything else. "Will we meet again?" Xiao Hu ran to the front and looked up at him. "Done." Li Qie gently stroked his head and smiled. "That depends on your future accomplishments." "I will try my best." The youth clenched his fists and declared before running back to Hallowed Dao Lord. "I should pay Pure Land a visit." Li Qie said. "I'll accompany you, young noble." Jilin Buddhist Emperor said softly, not expecting to see him again after an epoch of time. "Return first and wait." Li Qie said before gazing into the distance where someone was waving at him. "We will be waiting, young noble." She bowed. Li Qie nodded and floated up into the air, eventually disappearing into the horizon. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief after his departure. The battle today was unforgettable even to the battle-hardened veterans since it changed the direction of the upper continents. Li Qie left an indelible mark in their memories. They thought that they had gone far enough on the Tao path. Alas, witnessing his power made them wonder whether they had even started cultivating. There was much work to be done, but at the very least, the possibilities of the Tao were clearly endless. An ancient pine coiled like a dragon above a divine peak. The latter towered over the landscape but still seemed tiny compared to the tree. A woman perched on top of one of its branches, kicking her legs back and forth. She wore a white robe with her hair tied up in a bun, looking like a man at first sight. Her appearance could only be described as average. Nonetheless, she had no dead angle and one could never get tired of looking at her. Ordinary yet remarkably captivating. Words couldn't describe the juxtaposition. She had drunk with Xueqi previously and now, he joined her again on the tree branch. Gentle breezes caused the pine needles to sway softly and rustle like the waves of the ocean. The world could be seen in its entirety before them. She glanced at Xueqi and asked, "So? Did you feel cool playing the high heaven?" She paused for a moment and had a faint smirk. Being the high heaven feels pretty good, right? How pointless. Just another repetition. What I seek is not to replace but rather, an answer. He shook his head in response. Why not ask me? She smiled playfully but her suggestion contained strong implications. Even if I were to ask you, you don't know the answer. It is the same yet not. He said. Oh. So you've figured it out. She smiled. What I saw before wasn't like this. He said, I didn't recognize it then. Because I defeated you so thoroughly. She said before pausing for a bit. Yes, the same yet not, but in the end the same origin. Indeed. He admitted. From what I can tell, this impossible matter has precedence. It's different this time mission-wise. She shook his head. Why does it come? He stared at her and asked. She cast a glance at the horizon and didn't answer. It seemed that all living beings and the lands were within her sight. After a brief pause, she said slowly, This world is truly beautiful. There are some ugly aspects, but yes, it is beautiful indeed. He nodded. Chapter 5479. Absolute dominance. The woman took her time sensing the unique auras of the world. After a while she opened her eyes and said, How wonderful, really a cause for hesitation. Hesitation doesn't save it from being reduced to ashes. Xueqi smiled. You're ruining the mood. She said angrily. We both know what will happen. Xueqi shrugged. I am not the one responsible. She tilted her head and said. Then who is responsible? My epic is nearly at its prime. The inevitable is coming. Xueqi said. Yes. She pondered for a moment and admitted, the path that you're on will actually hasten it. That's not surprising. Xueqi said. So it won't be you. Everyone has their own karma and body. The same for me. She shook her head. Then perhaps it is time for a change. A new body. Xueqi said. 1. True, that body has been gone for a long time. She said. It's rather commendable. Entering and learning the world, growing to love it, enduring hardships without any regret. Xueqi said. Trying to persuade me? She uttered coldly. That's useless. You are not stronger than the other body. There is nothing you can do for me even if you stay here. He said. Looking down on me? She glared at him. Perhaps the beating last time was insufficient, not taking me seriously anymore after barely surviving. Of course not. He shrugged. You are perfection across the ages, transcending and ever transforming, neither male nor female nor anything else. Is that an insult? She seemed eager to beat Xueqi down. Her eyes flashed menacingly. I'm merely speaking the truth. You didn't look like this the last time we met. Plus, male or female, there's no difference at all to you since you are beyond such definition. He said. Whatever. The woman scoffed. He is him and I am me. He has his own karma and so do I. A single wish can change all of this. The karmic ties of the world do not bind you. You have a separate karmic system altogether just like him. Everything can be resolved. He said. Your attempt at creating a rift between us is useless. The woman said. We have the same source, so it's idiotic that you're even trying. Is that so? Under the previous circumstances, sure, but what about now? If I remember correctly, a different body does not think so. He said. So what? Born from 100 deaths, but it's all fleeting. Just merely surviving in this world. She said. Isn't that enough? Having fought countless emperors alone and sweeping through the continents. He said. That's just strutting around in an anthill. Not worth mentioning. The past body could have destroyed numerous epics with a single wave. She said with disdain. You're not wrong, it's definitely not on the same scale. He paused for a bit and said, however, that ants certainly enjoyed their time in life. Only by actually experiencing life would one be able to learn of its joys. Am I not a living being right now? She said. You are alive, not a rock, but you have too much awareness of your own. You're not settling in, choosing to observe the world instead of actually experiencing the joy of life. He said. Don't forget about the suffering. She snorted. As long as there are living beings, there will be joy and suffering. He nodded. No need to persuade me. She shook her head. He is deeply infected by the mortal coil, not I. I do not have such karma and need not such karma. Yes, your karma originated from a single thought and source. He said. If I were you, I would think more about how to escape or your preference of how to die. She suggested. I'm afraid I haven't thought of either. He smiled. I suppose your confidence is still intact despite running with your tail between your legs back then. She snorted. Let's not dwell on the past, and plus, I consider it a victory since you couldn't kill me. He smiled. Humph. We'll get another opportunity soon enough. She sneered. That day will come, but you probably won't remember what you have said today. He said flatly. This world is ephemeral, nothing more than a passing cloud. Dissipating is inevitable. No need to leave traces. She said. This is your karma and your meaning of existence? He asked. Skip this nonsense. Everything is possible, my body can be his or that body, and the three can be united as one again. I think it's impossible to have three bodies now. He smiled. Not right now, but in the future, the near future. She pondered for a moment before responding seriously. Li Qia's expression changed as well. He nodded in agreement. Yes, that body will definitely appear. And that is when your epic shall be destroyed. She tapped his shoulder and said, See, I'm nice enough to give you a heads up so you can prepare in advance lest be caught off guard. How can I ever repay you? He joked. Do you actually want to repay me? She asked. No, only if you stay. How can I repay someone who won't be here? He waved his hand. Humph, always scheming. She sneered. How am I scheming when it is entirely up to your desire? He disagreed. It's not possible. My body is incomparable to his. You have an immovable Tao heart. I have an immovable body. You have no control over it. She said. Yes, I am powerless here indeed. He nodded. Just accept reality. Death will come knocking. She said. Death to me is also joy, a sweet release. He earnestly said. What if death avoids you? She stared straight at him. He understood the implication and let a sigh before replying. It's inevitable, each has their own destiny. 1. I could use the word avatar here, but it's not quite that word. That would be an interpretation, so once there is more context, I might start using avatar instead. Right now, it's a simple word for body, but I'm sure the author is talking about avatars. Chapter 5480. The flames will spread to you. You do not wish to save? The woman asked. I can save one, but not all living beings. They have their own destiny. He said. Looks like you're just as heartless as us. Her eyes narrowed. It's fine to call me heartless, but I'm different from you all who were born without emotions. He disagreed. True, we never had emotions. She clapped in agreement. But, you're infected by the mortal coil now. He had a glimpse of amusement in his eyes while glancing at her. Don't give me that look. So what if I'm infected? I can sever it easily. She smiled. I don't think severing this karma is that simple. He responded. Do you know who you're talking to? My body can sever the mortal coil. I'm not him. She said with determination. Perhaps. He didn't wish to contest this issue. I must make my move. She warned, it'll be a full sweep when I arrive, you best be prepared. For what? You do your thing, I'll do mine, that's all. He shook his head. That's not your style, they are the closest to you. She said. Yes. He said sentimentally before sighing. Closest to me indeed. But you will just watch them die? She sneered. For the sake of watching the tigers fight and take advantage of the aftermath? To be carefree without looking back is a great fortune. They know what they will face before embarking on this path. Death is an acceptable ending. They must face this tribulation with courage. As you wish, I will not be holding back for any reason. She shrugged. Are you sure you can carry it out? He asked. Don't think I can? I will fight you right now in your own epic. She aggressively declared. No, you have seen everything before and killed wondrous cultivators. It's just that no one will sit idly awaiting death. Even rabbits will start biting when pushed to the brink. He shook his head. I want to see how they will bite. She said. Biting is one thing. They're most likely digging pits and waiting for you to jump in so they can bury you. He smiled. The pits need to be rather large. This has been their plan for a long time now. She chuckled. Patience has run out. Even your other body can wait no longer. He said. Just part of the cycle, a full sweep will right everything. She uttered coldly. After a brief pause, he changed the topic. Don't you ever thought about being yourself? Have you lost your mind? I am myself. She glared at him. I have a me as well. He asked me if I was being too cruel to myself. I didn't think so, but that was his perspective, an unmatched hardship and cruelty. He glanced at the sky and said. She didn't respond quickly this time. After a few seconds, she asked, So you feel that you're a bastard because of this? A bit. He shrugged. But if I'm a bastard, who else isn't? Putting that aside, do you think I'm suffering? Your words are useless. I am immovable. She gazed at the distance for a bit before lowering her head. I'm not persuading you to do anything. He shrugged. Well, I'm sure the trip must have been hard, so you shouldn't return empty-handed, and what's more significant than changes for us? Having said that, he pointed at his head and said, For us, changes can happen with a single thought. That's your perspective. She smiled. This doesn't happen with a single thought, it happened epochs ago for the other body. Sure, but a single thought sparked the change. He responded, a seed was planted and it would blossom in the future. It has taken root in our epoch. Heh. She chuckled and said, a single thought or not, it's meaningless because you cannot wait to see that day. Your epoch and your world, even you will have been reduced to ashes. Don't be so sure. Perhaps all of you won't be there in that distant future, but I will be. He said calmly. Replacing us? She glared at him. You already know that I do not wish to walk on a path that has been paved. Nothing changes in that case. I only want an answer. He shrugged. It won't be as you wish. She shook her head, having absolute confidence in her assertion. Either way, it must be done, just like how you will descend regardless of your wish, for this is your karma and duty. He said. I can sever it if I wish to. She responded. Exactly, and when that happens, your body shall be no more. He laughed. You do harbor this thought, so I don't need to say more. Worry about yourself first. The flames will eventually reach you. She said. They will reach you first. I'm not the one who can't sit still right now. You know this. He smiled. I can't wait until I beat this smug grin off your face. She snorted. Today, no one in this world would dare to speak to Li Chia like this. Alas, she seemed confident in carrying out this threat. How pitiful. The next time we meet, you can't even keep your word since you won't recognize and remember me, not even remembering your own threat. He shook his head. She froze for a moment because this was indeed the case. Who knows? I remember you now and still find you as annoying as ever. She said. Since you've descended into my world, we have connected. Once you're gone, so will the bridge. He said. She didn't respond this time. Sometimes I wonder about this feeling. Is it my own desire or something else? He asked. Did you ask your other self this? She stared at him. No, and it's too late now. Plus, It's probably not that important, he said. She ruminated the last line before glaring at him. You better give up on this idea. After I finish my sweep, we will have our life and death battle. Very well, I'll be waiting to see if you still remember these words when the time comes. He smiled. I will remember. She stood up and nodded at him. With that, she departed from the tree. Chapter 5481. Ashamedly, Xueqi left the tree, entering a certain dimension with someone waiting for him. Teacher. The man in yellow kneeled before Xueqi. He was none other than immortal Emperor Mingdu, a despicable traitor in the eyes of the people. Your student has brought disgrace to your name, teacher. The emperor apologized. You did no such thing. Your actions were selfless. Few in your position can abandon personal honor and reputation. Get up. Xueqi shook his head and lifted the emperor off the ground. To be able to see and speak with you again, teacher. Looks like I'm one of the lucky ones. He smiled happily. You nearly threw your life away by joining Heaven Alliance. Xueqi said. What else can I do when my skills are insufficient? I only wanted to join Celestial Court to get more information about the unknown guest. Somehow, I ended up joining it and ended up in Heaven Alliance amidst the chaos. Mingdu elaborated. At the very least, I managed to save Miss Sima and the others. Otherwise it would have been for nothing. He added while glancing at the woman who had a murderous chilling intent. She was none other than Sima Yujian, who had followed Xueqi to the 13 continents in the past. Young master. She bowed her head. Look at you, nearly throwing your life away too. Xueqi shook his head before taking out an old box. Here, time for you to have it back. This came from Miss Deity and originally belonged to Sima Yujian. I left this as a clue. She gently rubbed the box. Because of her disappearance. Xueqi smiled. Perilous, I'm sure, but I believe that she is still alive. Yujian said with determination. So I heard that you all tried to assassinate someone in Celestial Court. That didn't work out. Xueqi brought up the past. Sima Yujian appeared forlorn after this was brought up. She said softly, we received information regarding a foreign visitor not from this world. An investigation was warranted given the circumstances. He said. We asked the Empress and she shared the same concern. No one from outside should come here, and Celestial Court of all places. Yujian nodded. We speculated that this person must have come specifically for you, so we came up with a plan. Xueqi sighed and said, your cultivation isn't bad, but you can't deal with Celestial Court alone, let alone the visitor. Zhenjin and I only wanted to scout first, but the unexpected happened, forcing us to attack. We fought our way out with Zhenjin in the back line. I alone made it out, Yujian said. We're the ones who started the war. After the failed assassination, the furious Celestial Court declared judgment on the sinners. This was the start of immemorial epic war and a significant reduction in the number of emperors and monarchs. You didn't start it. Xueqi shook his head. It was settled with the arrival of the visitor. Celestial Court planned this long ago, but the overlords had their qualms. The visitor must have given them enough confidence to try. They just didn't expect the fierce response from everyone else. The Empress and the others prepared for years to create a momentum strong enough to fight that unknown visitor. The casualties were immense. Yujian said with regret. They were amazing. Xueqi said sentimentally. If only I were as capable. Mingdu said, I have done nothing in recent years. As I've said, few could do what you did, abandoning pride and reputation. Xueqi smiled. Mingdu was anything but a traitor. He joined Celestial Court to figure out all the secrets. I tried to find more information, but the visitor disappeared after the battle with the Empress. I delved into Celestial Court but couldn't find anyone either. Nonetheless, I heard about the method to control true bones. That's why I volunteered to join Heaven Alliance and descended. Mingdu elaborated. His main goal was to find the hidden overlords, but nothing came to fruition. He assumed that with the visitor's arrival, some of them might actually show up. Alas, there was no reaction. He then noticed prisoners from the war being moved to a certain place. Further research revealed the existence of a grand momentum and the usage of true bones. His insistence across the eras eventually yielded fruits. saving the prisoners from the momentum arrays. You make it sound so easy. Lichia patted his shoulder and said, The geezers are wily and patient, it's all right, you have done your best. I'm sorry for letting you down, teacher. Mingdu sighed. Look, I can't lock on to their coordinates either since the last epoch. You didn't spend as much time. I'm the one who should be embarrassed. Lichia chuckled. What should we do now, teacher? Mingdu asked. What can we do? The inevitable will come and no one will be able to escape. Lichia said. I understand. Mingdu knew about Lichia's plan from long ago, just not the exact details. Will you be going to Celestial Court now, young master? I must return as well to find Jianjin. Yujian couldn't stay calm. I will, but only when the time is right. There is no rush after waiting all this time already. He said, Are you confident that she is still alive? We had a designated location, so I must return there. Yujian said. Wait for the right time. Lichia said. I understand. She bowed and could see the bigger picture and the importance of prudence. Do as you like now, I have to leave. Lichia said. They bowed again and departed. Chapter 5482. Your destination Pure Land was renowned for its untraceable lineage and maintained a neutral stance, unlike the four alliances. The alliances were only known in the cultivation world. Mortals didn't have knowledge of them. Most never had the privilege to meet regular cultivators, let alone Dao lords and conquerors. Mortals viewed cultivators as mysterious immortals or gods capable of unbelievable feats. Due to a clear barrier, they had no idea they were protected by the various alliances. Mortals could eventually become cultivators and join the alliances, but by that point, they were now separated from their previous world. The same couldn't be said about Pure Land. The power of Buddhism protected all within its territories without any prejudice. One didn't need to be a Buddhist to enjoy the privileges. Moreover, enlightened monks appeared in each generation. They entered the mortal world and blessed the fateful ones, even the mortals. They assisted commoners and nobles alike with mental problems or being haunted by dream demons. Cultivators could use their assistance when dealing with heart devils as well. The marks of these monks could be seen all over Pure Land, unlike the top members of the alliances. Due to their virtuous deeds, those who stayed in Pure Land for a long period gradually sought out Buddhism. Its influence ran deep just like its rich history. Today, it had a new visitor, Lichia, who was accompanied by Jilin Buddhist Emperor. The two took their time walking and sensing the peace of this region. They heard Buddhist hymns and felt the affinity embedded in the winds. Pagodas shrouded by light could be seen in many places, often the source of the affinity. They washed and purified the inhabitants, granting them peace of mind. Mighty Buddhas were present as well, some capable of enlightening even emperors. The most famous among them was Meru, a Buddhist who eventually became an emperor as well. The force was majestic yet gentle and pleasant like spring itself. Travelers could relax during their journey. Lotus flowers bloomed beneath Jilin Buddhist Emperor's steps along the way. The Grand Tao harmonized in her presence. She vividly recalled the period of the 13 continents, the era of the emperors and monarchs and the golden age of her clan. Everything had changed today. 13 continents were reduced to 6. Most emperors and monarchs were no longer present along with their lineages. Blue seas replaced the mulberry fields. Eras passed by within the blink of an eye, but after meeting Lichia again and recalling the past, she understood how much had happened during her life. The two sat down in front of a cliff to enjoy the sea breezes. Even the ocean and its slightly salty air were filled with Buddhist affinity. Young master, for what purpose do people live? She eventually asked while staring straight at him. Do you wish to enter the world? He answered with a question. She tilted her head and ruminated for a bit before responding. Even if I do, where can I go? Only lands of the past. They are boundless, he said. Unfortunately, they aren't meant for me. She responded. Weary of the world, I see. He let out a sigh. I suppose Buddhism is essentially a leap away from the worldly realm. She remarked. However, one must still not forget the world. Otherwise, how can they spread Buddhism and deliver salvation? He smiled. Right, the two sides complement each other. She agreed. It's beyond that. Buddhism exists precisely because of the world and its living beings. He shook his head. She softly repeated his line. Would Buddhas exist without living beings? They are born from belief, so without thoughts and devotion, they will be nothing more than inanimate statues. He said. You're right about Buddhism. It exists because of living beings. She agreed. This is a key difference between Buddhism and Taoism. He said, Taoist cultivators train for the arts, but monks cultivate to become Buddhas. He then stared at her and said, Perhaps you should return to the mortal world, for that is your true destination, whether it be as a Buddhist emperor or a regular person. What makes you say this, young master? She asked. Her halo suddenly flashed brightly as if it was reacting to Li Qi's comment. Chapter 5483. You can go farther, that is your Tao. Li Qie said. My Tao. She said softly. She was once a princess of the Jilin, eventually becoming its ruler. Later on, she entered a Buddhist sect. Its name back then was not Pure Land. She eventually became a Buddhist emperor and lived reclusively in Pure Land. The mortal coil ceased to be a part of her life. Today, she entered the world again because of Li Qie. This was absolutely a challenge to her current Tao. From an imperial clan to Buddhism, now a return to the mortal realm. He said. She glanced at the horizon, seemingly capable of seeing the end of the world. Fate has separated us. Can I still go back? She asked. The world had changed entirely. Her clan was no longer there. The same for her friends and family members. Li Qie was someone who could keep up with her, but he was about to leave. The threads of fate weave in and out. It is all in your mind, whether it be Buddhism or anything else. He said. I can still break through, young master. She could tell that he was guiding her. He gently caressed her cheeks. She closed her eyes and felt his heat. His warmth brought her back to the past when she once cared about the world. You can go farther. Buddhism is confusing you right now and causing stagnation. He elaborated. But Buddhism is the reason for my current attainment. She said. Yes, success because of Buddhism, but also failure. You are stuck in the way of the past. He nodded. Is that why I should return to secular life? She said softly. No, it's not like that. Buddhism still exists as long as you wish it so. Nonetheless, you've been a Buddha for too long and it is time for a change. He said. I see, she answered. But I've traveled across the mortal realm before and delivered salvation. This was part of her journey before becoming a Buddhist emperor. You had the mindset of a passerby who will eventually leave. He smiled. Yes, because everything will disperse in the end. The mortal life is ephemeral. She agreed. To a new world. If there is nothing worth remembering in this world, sow the seeds in another and make it worthy. He said. Another world? She wondered. There might not be anything here for you now, but you can start anew in one of the new worlds. He said. New worlds. She became surprised. They will appear in due time. Nascent worlds grasping for life before the proliferation of living beings. You should be able to find a new path there, no longer limited to the current Buddhist Tao. He said. A nascent world. What about you, young master? Will you be there too? She asked. Yes, I must pass through them eventually. It's just that I have unfinished business right now. He said. When that day comes, I will be going ahead and waiting for you, young master. She bowed her head. He gently tapped her forehead 3 times and said, Until we meet again. He started walking away, but she called for him. Young master. He stopped and looked back with a smile. You were worrying about me? She asked. I have experienced the same confusion that you are now, the same for the many Buddhist sages in history, the overlords as well. Having attachments is necessary or the Tao heart will not be able to persevere. He said. I understand. I will be there in the new worlds. She took a deep breath and understood the reason. I hope everything will stay the same with you. He smiled and left for a certain area in Pure Land. The temple seemingly knew of Li Qie's arrival since a monk was waiting by the entrance. His kasaya was old with numerous patches. Nonetheless, this didn't matter due to the monk's impressive Buddhist aura. A halo floated behind him with an entire kingdom within. He possessed a casual demeanor, lacking the dignified air typically associated with enlightened monks. We meet again, sir. The monk greeted. Those from the lower continents would be startled to see him here. Mahayana Buddha of Myriad Buddha City. I agreed to a visit before, so here I am. Li Qie smiled. You are a man of your word. The monk placed his palms together and welcomed Li Qie to the temple. Divine chants and sacred radiance could be seen everywhere. Auspicious clouds covered a floating realm of Buddhism. All living beings here could become Buddhas in due time. The Dharma had no limits here. A particular lotus flower was quietly growing. It seemed to be the center of this realm and Buddhism. The monk next to Li Qie suddenly disappeared. After a buzz, the petals of the lotus opened and released wondrous light. Each burst contained boundless potential for Buddhism. Anyone seeing this phenomenon would want to prostrate before the light, surrendering to the righteous path. This spectacle made it seem as if someone was ascending into Buddhahood. Ker 1. Chapter 5484. Buddhism to the myriad Dao. A total of 188 lotus petals finally unfurled, revealing Mahayana Buddha sitting inside. Sir. He bowed his head and didn't stand up. 6 enlightenments, impressive. Li Qie smiled and said, You're too kind, sir. The monk bowed one more time before the lotus petals closed once more. Li Qie sat down in the meditative pose, closing his eyes and waiting patiently. After a long while, another radiant figure appeared inside the temple. My old bones can't greet you properly, my lord. The silhouette resembled a fusion between a dragon and a cat. Nonetheless, the voice was filled with Buddhist harmony. 1. Long time no see. Li Qie opened his eyes and said, Long indeed. The figure said sentimentally. Started with Buddhism and returned to Buddhism. The Buddhist seed is back in the kingdom. All karmic ties are gone now. Li Qie said. Yes. The figure agreed. The world is all yours now, we shall take good care of it. You sound as if I'm the one benefiting from this. Li Qie smiled. We do appreciate your protection. The figure said. There's cause and effect to everything. Just remember that you do not belong to this world, it is my epic. Li Qie said. I understand. We have no intention of disturbing or competing with others. The figure nodded. Of course, I'm flexible and can turn a blind eye to certain things. Li Qie said. You wish for us to pay. The figure understood that their karmic ties were over. It was business now. No free lunch for anyone, you know? Li Qie smiled. Of course, what is your demand, sir? The figure understood this logic. This was his epic, and although they had no intention of conquest, they still occupied territories. It's not much at all. We can settle this amicably. I just need you all to hide a seal, that's it. Li Qie said. 2. The figure fell into silence after hearing this. Sir, you are the primordial, our Buddhism cannot compare to you. The figure said. I'm not asking for you to reach my level, only to hide something while enjoying my protection, it's that simple. Li Qie said. Is that too much to ask? The figure smiled wryly and said. Is that all we will be doing, sir? If you are willing to do so, do you think your Buddhism will only encompass this small piece of land in the future? Li Qie asked. We do not dare to encroach on your world, sir. This paradise is enough for us. The figure said. What if I open it up? The implications will be far-reaching. Not even the prime of your epic had this level of influence. Li Qie said. Open it up. The figure was stirred after hearing this. Permission won't be granted. There will be a tribulation. The figure calmed down and said. This is my epic. I will allow it in the future. Li Qie smiled. You have communicated with the high heaven? The figure realized something. The situation is dire. There's not much of a choice any longer. Otherwise, I'll go all out and become another variable. Li Qie said. The figure contemplated the matter before asking, Sir, aren't you pushing us to the forefront? That's the wrong way to look at it. If I were to excavate this land, why should I leave a plot to you all for nothing? Li Qie shook his head. This small plot won't be that easy to keep. The figure smiled wryly. Let's not get greedy now, can't have your cake and eat it too. Li Qie said, You have benefited from my protection, it is time for reciprocation. Will you show mercy if we do not wish to comply? The figure asked after a brief silence. I've always been merciful, but the world does not let me be myself. Li Qie smiled. What will happen then? The figure asked with a tinge of helplessness. Well, I am powerless to a few things. I can't be watching all of this vast world at once. There will be places with cracks and openings, allowing the heaven to take notice. After all, its villainous eyes are treacherous and always watching. Li Qie said. True, the world is vast indeed. The figure understood the consequences. I can put in a little more effort since we know each other. Li Qie smiled. You know that Buddha, right? The one with the burial ground. Is that the Buddhism that you seek? If that's the case, then I'll do my best. We don't blame you if it comes down to that. The figure let out a sigh. This was his world, so if he were to ask for it back, it was time to return it. See, I'm rather reasonable for coming here first and letting all of you know to avoid any misunderstanding. Li Qie said. Thank you for that. The figure bowed its head before talking. Well, sir, if we do ascend, it's no different from asking for a calamity. No, the difference is considerable. Normally, just looking up is enough for them to initiate a slaughter. Li Qie said. You have a deal already? The figure asked, thinking that Li Qie already had a plan in motion. Not yet, but it is inevitable, an opportunity unavailable to anyone else. Li Qie said. An opportunity, the figure murmured. From Buddhism morphing to the myriad Tao, perhaps this is the way. Li Qie said with a serious expression. The figure had a serious expression as well after thinking about a crucial key point. This wasn't only an attempt to extort them. He seemed to be guiding them as well. So, what is your decision? Li Qie shrugged and said. I suppose we don't really have a say in this. The figure smiled wryly. Of course you do, but just know that when the path is chosen, you will have to see it through even if it means crawling. Li Qie smiled. Chapter 5485. Fate. The figure sighed and said, I suppose there's no point in avoiding the inevitable. We will listen to you, sir. Don't sound so pitiful as if I'm forcing you all against your will. Who knows, you might even enjoy it in the future and work hard. Li Qie shook his head. Buddhists like us have little desires. The figure said. If that's the case, then why does Pure Land exist along with the search for Buddhist seeds? Seems like desires to me. Li Qie said. What you say makes sense, sir, but we are merely passing down our legacy, not fulfilling our ambition. The figure said. Passing legacy down is not a crime, but that's just the present. Perhaps this will change in the future into something greater. Li Qie said. I'm afraid we can't envision it right now. The figure said. Sure, uncertainties are there, but can you do worse than the old geezer Sure? Li Qie smiled. The turtle paused for a moment before responding. We can try with your permission. My permission is trivial compared to your group's determination. As long as you are willing, everything is possible, but of course, there is a cost. Li Qie said. We will remember, sir, but it seems like we'll be bearing the brunt. The figure asked the crucial question. Would you do it if I ask? Li Qie stared at the figure. I don't know if our current selves are still of use. The figure hesitated for a bit before responding. At the very least, you all will be doing something. Li Qie said. We've thought about fighting before but eventually decided against it. Perhaps we cannot escape destiny. Honestly, if you all could do something up there, I wouldn't be standing here right now. Li Qie said. We are ashamed. The figure sighed. Don't be. Those who saw and walked away are still renowned. Only a selected few can take the next step. Li Qie said. Right, I couldn't take the next step because of my heart devil. The figure nodded in agreement. Perhaps waiting is the best for all of you. You will be able to see your true pursuit and defeat the heart devil then. Li Qie said. Sir, we'll definitely make plans. The figure agreed that this was an opportunity. They didn't dare to make a move in the past, but since this was Li Qie's epoch, perhaps they could unleash their full potential. It's decided then. Li Qie nodded. I don't have any other demand. It's your own issue if you want to progress further up there. Feel free to stay in this region for now. We understand and shall obey. The figure and Li Qie came to an agreement. With that finished, Li Qie turned to leave. The figure called out and asked, "Sir, do you think the burial ground could have survived?" Li Qie stopped and sighed. "Hard to say, it's a very low probability. I don't know how many survivors there are. Perhaps they have turned to ashes already. I hope they're still alive," the figure said with a hopeful tone. "In my opinion, I don't think there's a chance for the 9 Buddhas to combine in your lifetime. Don't wait any longer." Li Qie shook his head. "I understand." The figure let out a sad sigh. Yi Fantian has been waiting and came up to Li Qie after he left Pure Land. "Sir, where will we go now?" She bowed. "Not far, to your future training ground," Li Qie said. "We're not going to the immortal continent?" She was surprised to hear this. "I will be. You will stay behind to train," he said. "Which merit law would you like me to learn?" She took a deep breath and asked. "You have your own fortune and supreme grand Tao. I don't need to pass down a merit law, that's no longer important." He shook his head. "What should I do then?" She didn't expect this response either. Li Qie summoned True Bones and handed it to her. "Take this with you. You shall not come out of training until you have full mastery over it. Only then will you be able to dominate and become renowned." Of course, she was already renowned but still needed to go even further. She became emotional after seeing True Bones, the weapon of an epic overlord. Not even Supreme could have controlled this paragon artifact without the help of the wondrous momentum. Her current body would crumble just by attempting to use it despite having 12 Tao fruits. Who knows if Celestial Court even had another weapon of this level? "You're giving it to me?" she asked with astonishment. Who would actually gift a paragon artifact away? Li Qie didn't bother to say anything else and placed it in her hand. She looked down and saw a terrifying aura emanating from the blade, ready to annihilate the entire world. This was before any power channeling. Chapter 5486. I want to be an ox, sir. Will I be fighting Celestial Court with it? She took a deep breath and asked with a serious expression. "No, I cannot wait that long. Celestial Court will not exist when you are ready." Li Qie shook his head. This caused her to tremble because Celestial Court was an ancient existence. According to the legends, it had existed before the splitting of heaven and earth. This was obviously an exaggeration. Nonetheless, it shared the same sentiment felt by many cultivators. Celestial Court had withstood the test of time, surviving one war after another. Now, Li Qie had absolute confidence in destroying it in the near future. Anyone else would have been branded a fool for making this statement. Of course, Li Qie was an exception. "Sir, what do you wish for me to do?" she asked, aware of her fortune in both being under Li Qie's tutelage and obtaining True Bones. "Think grander, don't be stuck with Celestial Court or this nonsense between the race and the people." Li Qie smiled. "I was short-sighted." She lowered her head and apologized. Cultivation is a personal journey with a strong focus on the Tao heart. You don't need merit laws. The only thing I can do is to guide the way." Li Qie said. "And that is all I need, sir," she said, not daring to be greedy. "You don't need to ask me what you should do. Answer this question yourself during the journey." Li Qie said. "What I should do?" She contemplated. "You won't be able to know the answer right now. Try again once you can wield True Bones." He nodded. "I understand," she said. He raised his hand and changed the fabrics of reality, opening a boundless world for her. "Walk the path of the Tao while listening to your heart," he advised. She stared at the portal and thought that upon her return, this world would change drastically. "Would we be able to meet again?" she asked. "If you travel far enough, then yes, we'll meet again," he said. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will repay you with my life in the future." She performed 9 kowtows in reverence. He had given her enough confidence to attempt the 12-fruit method on top of granting her True Bones. Moreover, she had a clear direction of what to do right now as well. After paying her respect, she leaped into the portal without any hesitation. Li Qie closed the portal and wanted to leave. However, he frowned and glanced at someone. "Young noble." The person immediately got on his knees and kowtowed as well. He was none other than Ferocity, who had followed Li Qie previously. "Why are you following me?" Li Qie asked. I have no family or home, a forever vagabond with no option. May I stay with you and toil like an ox? Ferocity was intelligent enough to know the great fortune of following Li Qie. Others would be killed for this insolence, but he had the pleasure of following Li Qie for a brief time. Perhaps he actually had a chance. I don't need an ox. Li Qie shook his head. And it wouldn't be your turn either, brat. A massive snail approached the duo. I'll be the ox. The snail tapped on its shell loudly and said, Young master, I'll carry you around. Li Qie smiled, having far more patience for this snail than Ferocity. Ferocity couldn't respond because the snail was none other than Calamity Dao Lord. Of course, he didn't know the history between these two back in cleansing incense. What have you learned? Li Qie shook his head disapprovingly. Young master, I might not be the strongest but my techniques are still unique. Niufen smiled wryly. So arrogant after learning the 18 solutions. Li Qie chuckled. Hey now, I have my own Grand Dao now, way better than the solutions. Niufen protested. I suppose that sounds a bit better. You didn't waste all this time. Li Qie smiled. Young master, I'm a Dao Lord, you know? You're making it sound as if I'm a nobody. Niufen said indignantly. After all, he was an apex Dao Lord with few equals in the upper continents. Li Qie stared at him in silence, causing him to shrink his head down and add, Of course, I'm just an insect compared to you, a firefly who can't compete with the bright moon. Your shamelessness far exceeds your cultivation. Li Qie shook his head. Of course. Niufen smiled happily. Get on, young master, it'll be just like the past. What do you want? Li Qie was in a good mood as well. What else but to follow you wherever you go? Niufen said. Fine, we'll be going to the immortal continent since I'll be following his path. You should focus on cultivation lest risk embarrassing yourself any further. Li Qie said. To the immortal continent then. Niufen became excited. We'll crush Celestial Court and the old turtles in there. He reverted back to being Niufen from the 9 worlds, no longer an apex cultivator of the 6 continents. Li Qie jumped on the shell and sat down. May I accompany the two of you, young noble and senior? Ferocity got on his knees. Li Qie smiled and summoned a short-handled trident out of thin air. He gave it to Ferocity and said, Let's see what you can do with this. I humbly accept the gift. Ferocity saw the weapon pulsing with primordial light and became startled. He didn't forget to kowtow and show his gratitude. Let's go. Li Qie patted Niufen. Let's go. Niufen roared excitedly and disappeared into the horizon. Chapter 5487. Death of the Emperors, Birth of the Souls. The immortal continent remained intact compared to the other 5, hence its name. Due to its fortunate state after the Grand Calamity, the spirit energy and resources here remained ample. Thus, cultivators here had a clear advantage compared to those in the lower realms. Nonetheless, the rules here were rather strict. Because of this, powerful cultivators preferred to stay in the upper continents instead. 3 major powers divided the continent: Celestial Court, Immortal Dao City, and Imperial Field. Celestial Court was the oldest, praised to have existed during the start of this world. The size of its territories was unimaginable. Some said that it was larger than all 6 continents combined. Because of their resources and prestigious past, many top cultivators chose it as their home. Its influence also started the divide between the race and the people. This remained active even in the present day. Public opinions were polarizing. Some blamed Celestial Court for sowing the seeds of discord in the 6 continents. However, its supporters hailed them as stalwart defenders. Immortal Dao City and Imperial Field were far younger in comparison. The former was considered the older of the two since the heavenly treasure appeared during Skysplitter War. Purewood Divine Emperor, Immortal Emperor Fei Yong, and Immortal Emperor Bujan established a new order capable of contending against Celestial Court. As for Imperial Field, it appeared after Grand Dao War. The Empress and her allies combined their power to deal with the darkness. Some believe that Imperial Field was around way before that, tracing back to the previous epoch. It simply kept a low profile and never participated in the previous wars. This theory perplexed others because why would they stay out of these existential crises? An explanation was that they were merely training their elites and forming the right formation arrays in preparation for the most frightening war, Grand Dao. Sure enough, they eventually took down the darkness. Would they have been able to do so without ample preparation and accumulation? The casualties were immense for the emperors and monarchs. The number ranged similarly to that of Immemorial Epoch War. Immemorial Epoch, Skysplitter, and Grand Dao left behind numerous battlefields in the upper continents. Timeline and spatial fabrics shattered, resulting in perilous black holes. The immortal continent only managed to survive these wars due to its fortune after the Grand Calamity. Any other continent would have been reduced to ashes long ago. Boom! A massive snail landed on the immortal continent. Your daddy's back. Immortal continent. Nyofen laughed after arriving. He became carefree after taking the role of Li Qie's mount, no longer needing to put up a dignified act. Despite his unwillingness, he still had to act properly as a Dao Lord. Now, he could finally say whatever he wanted to. After all, Li Qie could deal with anything. Li Qie scanned the area and took a deep breath. The energy here is so dense. Nyofen breathed in as well and said sentimentally, that's why it survived so many wars. However, the battle intents are still raging. The death of emperors means the birth of numerous souls. Li Qie nodded in agreement. You should have seen it. Corpses rained from the sky. We had a hard time gathering them for a proper burial. Nyofen murmured. Li Qie sighed and glanced in a particular direction. Nyofen followed his gaze and asked with excitement, Young master, shall we destroy Celestial Court right now? In due time, just not right now. We need to warm up first to get more players involved. Li Qie smiled and said, Haha, I see, have to kill them in one go, getting rid of all those treacherous geezers. Nyofen understood the plan and resembled a hoodlum pulling up his sleeves, eager for a fight. As for now, we'll be gathering remains and free the souls. Li Qie said. Only you can do it, young master. We can't even if we try for a lifetime. Nyofen said softly. Li Qie nodded in agreement. The 3 wars resulted in countless deaths. The fallen combatants' lost souls still roamed the battlefields. Crossing them over to the other side was easier said than done. Attempting to do so meant incurring karmic consequences. However, Li Qie was in control of this world and could personally make the souls agree to move on. He glanced at a particular battlefield and noticed a particular aura, something rather indescribable. Nyofen noticed it too and said, Is that where we'll start? Let's go take a look. Li Qie tapped its shell. I'm afraid I can't go there. Nyofen hesitated. A place that you don't dare to go? Where did your courage run off to? Li Qie couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 5488. It's nice being immortal, young master. That's not fair since it's not just me. Aside from those with unparalleled physiques or some perverts with strange habits, who would want to go to such a nauseating place? Nyofen protested. Will it kill you? He smiled. No, it won't cost me my life, but that's not the point. Everyone else avoided him. It's still too much after all these years after the fatal palm strike. Nyofen dropped his head and said, Fine, just wait for me outside. Li Qie patted again. Young master, you do understand me, you're the best. Nyofen said happily. Right, and you repay me by not even following a simple command. Li Qie complained. Young master, I will not hesitate to run into a mountain of blades or an ocean of fire for you. I'll be the first to kill anyone who dares to oppose you, but to go to the place where Mujwa died? That's too difficult. Back then, everyone was fighting their heart out, enraged with bloodthirst, but the moment he got there, they all ran out of the battlefield. Nyofen elaborated. Sounds about right. Li Qie smiled. That's why it isn't my fault. Nyofen said, You don't know how terrifying Mujwa was back then. He stopped Celestial Court's advances just by being present. Well, I suppose he did contribute meritoriously and bought a lot of time for us to breathe. We might have been finished otherwise. I hope he was happy to do something for others and give meaning to his existence. Li Qie became sentimental. Haha, I wouldn't wish for his existence. Hell, I preferred death in battle over being near him. Nyofen shook his head. And I'm not the only one. That aura is unbearable. Loathed by both life and death, He reached a limit of the Tao with it. Li Qie said. No one dared to attack him either. One smash could have ended him, but then, it was like slapping a pile of manure, except the stench would linger for eras. Niufen shuddered. It's a testament to his greatness. He didn't care about the world and hated himself, yet his Tao heart was strong enough to stir him into action. Li Qie sighed and said, I would rather be beaten to death than to cultivate his Tao. A fate of being repulsed by all with no escape in sight. Niufen said, You wouldn't be able to do it anyway. Li Qie shook his head. Normally, cultivators cultivate the Tao first and then their mind and heart. His Tao required a particular mindset and mood as prerequisites. Mortals started this road by wanting to learn techniques and merit laws. Once they reached a certain level, they understood the importance of the Tao heart. Powerful abilities alone didn't take them far enough. Only those with the right Tao heart could reach greater heights, eventually striving for potential immortality. Seems like he was one step ahead of everyone then. Niufen commented. Yes, so close to everlasting life since death didn't want him. Li Qie said. Lifespan was not infinite for cultivators. They used various methods of life prolongment, the most popular being sealing themselves to pause the flow of time. Others utilized natural treasures and alchemy materials. Some cultivated secret techniques, hoping to improve their cultivation drastically for a longer lifespan. Another method included utilizing the momentum of special locations. All in all, these methods were temporary measures and death remained inevitable. Immortal Emperor Mu Zhua was special in that he didn't utilize any of these methods. In fact, he didn't even want to live, hoping for the sweet release of death. Unfortunately, this didn't work. He could have lived longer if it wasn't for the palm strike ending him. He would have most likely outlasted anyone at the emperor level. Sigh, forget it. No point in living forever while being reviled by everything. Such a Tao shouldn't be cultivated. Niufen commented. This Tao is inevitable once the mind reaches that point. Of course, it's rare for this to happen. Li Qie smiled. I suppose he is indeed worthy of admiration, to be able to do something so unique. Niufen said. The hardships experienced in order to develop this mindset and the Tao. Li Qie sighed and commented. It's definitely better to stay as a mortal in this scenario. Niufen said softly. Being a mortal was a far-fetched dream to him. Li Qie gazed into the horizon and said. Niufen had no comment. A once dominant immortal emperor ended up being hated by everyone. Eras have passed and his repulsive aura still infected this land. Grass and flowers didn't dare to grow here. If a rock could run, it would not be anywhere near this place. Thus, a basin could be seen and nothing else within the battlefield. People had joked about the basin being the land running away from his corpse. In reality, it was most likely the aftermath of the palm strike. His killer was not freed from consequences, being subjected to being repulsive for who knows how long? The repulsion didn't stem from a smell or any other senses. This was an invisible force keeping everyone away and instilling disgust in a mystical manner. This feeling came deep from the mind and couldn't be controlled. Chapter 5489. Charming those near the battlefield were subjected to an instinctive hatred. Perhaps that hatred always existed in the heart and mind, albeit hidden and controlled. It would resurface one day, whether it be towards a person or thing. Eventually, this hatred could escalate and act as a flood breaking the dam, fully forcing someone into a blind rage. Just looking at this place alone invoked this uncontrollable feeling, robbing someone of their sanity and control over their own body. This caused an intense feeling of nausea, hence everyone wanting to stay away. The powerful Tao heart of top cultivators couldn't prevent this phenomenon for long enough. Their absolute control over their emotions was utterly nullified under these circumstances. Young master, I can't stay here a second longer. Niufen's nausea and hatred gradually intensified as he drew closer. Of course, he could still last longer, but what was the point? This was discomforting and meaningless. You've grown complacent. Li Qie smiled. This is akin to picking up a pile of manure and bringing it closer to my mouth. I can't do it. Aren't you sensing it too? Niufen said bitterly. Wait here then, I don't want to see your sorry state anyway. Li Qie said. You're the best. He bowed his head and was happy to be spared from this torture. Lichia chuckled and kicked the guy flying before moving ahead alone to the basin. He saw nothing along the way. Life forms simply didn't want to be here, preferring not to be born at all. Due to the ever-present repulsive aura, no one had managed to pick up the emperor's corpse to give him a proper burial. Lichia was one of the few exceptions managing to get this close. However, he saw a second exception standing on a mound before the basin. In fact, his brows furrowed after seeing her due to her unmatched appearance. This could temporarily cause others to forget about the unpleasant aura. She was dressed in black with a thin veil. The loose attire didn't do a great job of hiding her figure and only caused minds to wander with fantasies. What truly made the heart race was her alluring aura, capable of ensnaring souls. One would become her prisoner after a split second of staring at her. She only needed to stand there to grasp the senses. Spectators would be driven mad with thoughts of wanting to embrace her as tight as possible, going as far as wanting to fuse into one being with her. She stirred up one's primal desires and needs without needing to lift a finger. If she were to smile, that would deliver a fatal blow to anyone's sanity and overwhelm the repulsive aura. Nonetheless, the repulsive aura also diminished her allure to an extent. If others were to come here, they might not be driven crazy right away while being affected by two contrasting affinities. "We've finally met, sir." She bowed in Lichia's direction and said softly. Her grateful bow could have been deadly, the same for her soft voice capable of turning bones into jelly. "I didn't expect to see you waiting here," Lichia said with a smile. "It is because I didn't wish to insult you with my aura, so this place was the perfect choice," the woman said. "A perfect masterpiece indeed." Lichia meticulously examined the woman's appearance. Her dress and veil did little to shield her from his eyes. Eventually he sighed and said, "Born of nature and self-molded, Lord of Derivation couldn't have done this." Chapter 5490. Do I deserve to die, sir? "Thank you, sir. You have the vision of an immortal." She bowed gracefully and made people forget about the nauseating aura. "You didn't wait here only to praise me, right?" Lichia smiled. "I wish to go on a walk with you. Would that be all right?" She revealed a kingdom-toppling smile while her eyes flashed with a hopeful glimmer, making it difficult for anyone to refuse. Her penetrating yet tender gaze could easily ensnare anyone. Accepting her request was the only possible outcome. "Why not?" He smiled and started walking. She followed him with elegant steps, keeping the perfect distance for the situation. She was accompanied by a comforting scent emanating from her body. Just one sniff and one would find life to be so beautiful. Having the privilege of walking side by side with her. "Sir, do I deserve to die?" she asked along the way. "You tell me." He stared at her in response. She met his gaze with composure and ease, not putting on an act, but her innate charm still oozed out. It rippled in her eyes like water, resonating with the heart. "I don't think I do. If we were to use emperors and conquerors as the standard, I would consider myself to be rather innocent," she said. He gazed in the distance and said, "Don't dwell only on the present and past, think about the future as well." "So will I deserve to die in the future then?" she asked straightforwardly, ready for any answer. "You are the only person who knows the answer," he said. "Sir, I don't have any ambition nor do I demand perfection." She tilted her head in rumination before answering. "Good, some use ambition as an excuse before falling into the darkness, becoming the thing they hated the most." Lichia smiled. "That is why I'm more than content to move forward alone," she said with determination. "Do you know your origin?" he asked. "I do, and I know the need to cleanse my impurities and address my flaws," she said. "Good." Lichia nodded. "Having ample self-awareness is rare. But, due to your nature, everything can come easy to you. Many things are within reach. Seduction is my intrinsic nature, but I wish to sever and transform into my own self," she said earnestly. "I do not deny that I possess, but that is no fault of my own." "That is true. You didn't ask to be born with these physical characteristics, merely created in this manner," he said. "Thank you for understanding, sir." She bowed and appreciated his insight. "However, you do have a gift that cannot be changed," he continued. "The marvel of procreation." "I am aware, sir." She sighed and said, Her disheartened sigh could instill deep sorrow into anyone. They would be willing to do anything to see her smile. That's why it is not your fault. This was decided during your creation, the meaning of your existence. He said. But that is not what I am. She said begrudgingly. Yes, you are an unsuccessful product who is purposely limiting your seduction and having a different agenda. He said. I only wish to be normal. She agreed. What you are can't be changed, but you can decide who you are. He said, you are a living sentient creature who is free to pursue your goal, whatever it may be. I wish to be free, hence my continuing attempt to transform. She eventually answered after a brief pause. And this insistence only adds to your charm. Xueqi smiled. Without this strive for perfection, you wouldn't possess your current charm capable of driving others crazy. It's a matter of Buddhism and mystical techniques. When you strive for Buddhism, you will naturally gain techniques despite your wish. So in your case, do not think twice about the seduction that is innate in your flesh and bones. Your charm will diminish as a result. Sounds like a paradox. She said. It is definitely counterintuitive, but one version is potentially cataclysmic. The other might be fine. Xueqi said. Please elaborate on what I should do, sir. She bowed again. Your path is self-perfection, but your innate body determines your gifts and abilities. The stronger you become in order to shed it, the greater your charm. He repeated. But what else can I do? She furrowed her brows. In spite of the paradox, once you reach the ultimate state, you will revert to the origin and be able to hide the seduction. He explained. Ultimate state as in the path of the emperors and conquerors? She asked. It is different. He said, if you are able to return to your true self, you will be able to go even farther due to your innate advantages, a foundation not found in any other. Listening to you, sir, is more beneficial than 100,000 years of cultivation. She expressed her gratitude. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.